Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about the denial of the government's motion for reconsideration and to get a stay in the Massachusetts case involving Judge Murphy. Just to review the bidding here, we should think of it as a separate case because it involves a separate kind of cause of action. These are the people, 8, 10, 12. It's a little bit unclear, and there's the potential of a class besides who have been sent to South Sudan, the youngest country in the world, and it's almost not even a country on any given day. Place where prisoners, refugees, people trying to get to Europe have been raped, assaulted, robbed. It's kind of like a Wild West would be putting it too nicely. So it's a purposeful effort, it seems to me, to send immigrants to a really miserable place. You have the high-tech miserable place of CCOT in El Salvador. This is the low-tech miserable place. All right, but the cause of action is, it's a matter of due process. These are people whose home country will not take them, perhaps, or they have a well-founded fear of prosecution if they return to their home country. So this is a different kind of thing, even though the notion is they need to have a chance, and the U.S. denied them the chance to make a claim. I'm going to be persecuted if you send me to South Sudan. Don't send me to South Sudan. Or wherever the law is, if you can't go to your home country, the U.S. can send you any place that will accept you, assuming, of course, it's not otherwise barred by, for example, a well-founded fear of prosecution. All right. Judge Murphy in Massachusetts gets this class of people. He enters a preliminary injunction saying you got to give them real notice here, reasonable, but he's in general pretty flexible and working with the U.S. to give them play in the joints and not to, completely tell them what to do. And of course, how the administration responds to that is by abusing it. With 15 hours of notice, based only on a one-sheet English piece of paper, they fly them out toward South Sudan. But Murphy gets wind of this before they've arrived, and he stops the music while the plane is in Djibouti in East Africa on its way to South Sudan, and that's where it remains. And drama has played out at that point. The first thing he does is find they violated his preliminary injunction, and he's mad, and there have been several judges now that have called out the administration's violations, but Murphy perhaps the most kind of fiery and sharply toward the U.S. So what's happened in the last day or two? The U.S. he says, you violated the preliminary injunction. You must give these guys some notice. You can do it if you like. He gives them a lot of flexibility and says, would you like to do it? You can bring them home and do it, or you can do it on that plane, and you can take as long as you want, but you got to bring in lawyers, you got to bring in translators, etc., to give people the due process right to at least make the claim, I have a good reason not to be sent to South Sudan. The U.S. files a motion for reconsideration and to stay his ruling, basically saying, it's so complicated and effortful to do this on the plane. How can you make us do it while they're still there, etc.? That sends Murphy around the corner. Let me read his very first line from the opinion denying the motion for reconsideration and stay. Defendants have mischaracterized this court's order while at the same time manufacturing the very chaos they decry. And he goes through it all, including the transcript, and says, I gave you guys the option. I didn't order you to do it this way. I'm trying to be flexible with you, but you must give them their due process rights. And they continue, does the administration, to try to elude that baseline obligation. So at that point, he really, that's very, incendiary words. And, this is another that's going to go up to, in his case, the First Circuit, a fairly progressive circuit, and then potentially the Supreme Court. But what he said is, no, you don't get a motion for reconsideration. Why not? Because you clearly did violate the preliminary injunction. I told you to give them notice. I didn't force you to say what it was, but 15 hours in English and shepherding them away, that's no good. They haven't had a chance to really assert their claims. You violated it, and then you want a motion for stay. And why is that? And they tried to, as the United States does, manufacture reason and argument about how hard it is to do this now, etc. And he's really having none of it. And he says, no stay. He goes through the whole, who's likely to prevail? The plaintiffs are likely to prevail. Again, you violated the order, United States, and you haven't even tried. Where are the balance of equities? With the plaintiffs who are suffering irreparable injury if they, have a valid claim every single day, and et cetera, et cetera. So it starts very, sharply against, it's just amazing the profusion of district courts just calling the administration out as squirrely, as liars. So defendants have mischaracterized this court's orders, while at the same time, they're the ones who are manufacturing the very chaos. So on the one hand, they haven't done yet what they're supposed to, and this is happening in other places. On the other, he is a dog with a bone and not letting them go. And if they somehow try to elude this, giving them, the plaintiff class, the notice that they deserve and going through a hearing on the plane or however, he's just gonna be all over them and not let it happen. And then they can take emergency relief to the First Circuit, but I don't see they're getting it. In general, the game in several courts now is that courts have found, and there's no way around it, that the U.S. has just ignored orders, bobbed and weaved, tried to get out of it, and the courts are trying to be careful about not imposing the sort of remedy that would give an independent claim to the U.S. to go up and say, emergency Court of Appeals or Supreme Court. Okay, maybe we violated, but he can't make us fill in the blank, go to jail, pay all this money, etc. So here as well, what Murphy has said, separately, basically, you're in criminal contempt. We'll deal with that later. But what is going on now is give them notice. I told you to give them notice. 15 hours is not, and a piece of paper in English is not notice. Give them notice. And he has jurisdiction over them. It's a plane flown. It doesn't matter that it's in Djibouti. It's under the control of U.S. officials. That means it's in his jurisdiction to order them. So he's just not letting it go. This will be one that the U.S. will be really hard pressed to, not to comply with. And then I think that the courts above Murphy will have his back. So in some ways, it's just another instance of a clear violation, and his being insistent. You could compare him with Judge Boasberg in D.C., Judge Zinnes in Maryland. But he has been bolder, maybe because of what's happened with Zinnes and Boasberg and elsewhere, and it matters sort of in a PR way, or they will eventually try the administration to claim he is biased. He has been bolder about calling them out and calling them liars, essentially, which they are, no doubt about it. One final point here is Trump totally going to town, and he did on Memorial Day, basically calling out Murphy and others. So I've given up, as you know, trying to psychoanalyze him, but he's so unhinged. This is the president of the United States with Memorial Day message to the citizens of the United States. Happy Memorial Day to all. Could have stopped there, but then the Tourette's or whatever it is kicked in, including the scum that spent the last 4 years trying to destroy our country through warped radical left minds who allowed 21 million people, actually he writes 21 million and then million people to illegally enter our country, many of them being criminals and mentally insane, through an open border that only an incompetent president would approve, and through judges who are on a mission to keep murderers, drug dealers, rapists, gang members, and release prisoners from all over the world in our country so they can rob, murder, and rape again. Murphy is obviously encompassed here, and, that means that Trump's followers, that it's a potential danger and menace for Murphy that he calls out and says stuff like this, and we know that the judges have been concerned by exactly this kind of conduct. So the other thing to mention is that Trump has Murphy firmly in the crosshairs, and I think has left a message that his lone wolf followers, as well as Judge Murphy himself, likely interpret as an invitation to send some pizza and perhaps worse to Murphy. So that's part of the drama here as well. But I think this is going to play out in short order. Administration has to, in pretty short order, give them the hearing to which they're entitled. It's hard to see what the administration says about why they can't do that. And if they do it, they've complied, and things can go forward again. All he's saying is notice an opportunity to be heard, and it's not like Abrego Garcia where they are in the jurisdiction of another person. His order here, which does say do anything you can to facilitate, is pretty close to an order that just says do it, United States, no ifs, ands, and buts. So we'll see if the administration tries to wriggle out of even this, which would suggest that basically, almost for disobedience sake, to not look as if they are subject to the will of the law as set down by the courts. The administration might be rebelling here. We'll see in fairly short order, but the obvious thing to do is go through the hearings, etc., on the plane as Murphy has ordered, and he is going to be scrutinizing it that close. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.